Hey guys, in today's video, I want to talk about 5 books that were pivotal in taking me from a boy and growing me into a man. This is by no means the only books that were pivotal in that journey, but I was taking a look at my bookshelves and this is 5 that kind of popped out at me that you may or may not have heard before. So we're going to get right into it. The first one is Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. This book is a novelization of the Battle of Thermopylae, which is when the 300 Spartans stood against all of Xerxes' armies. And this book is a fascinating look at what the spirit of a warrior is. And there's a line in this book that they talk about where one of the older men is talking to one of the younger men, and he's asking him, what is the opposite of fear? They're talking about fear going into battle. And he says, like, what is the opposite of fear? Because we don't want to be fearful. We want to have the opposite of that, right? And the answer that the man gets to is he says, the opposite of fear is love. And you think about that and you're like, oh my gosh, you take that back to the Bible. And in the Bible, it says perfect love drives out fear. And so that idea was just a pivotal idea for me, trying to focus on and understand God's love and understand my love for myself and for the world around me. And then later on for a girl, and then later on for the girl that became my wife, and all these things. And it was just a very fascinating and pivotal read in my life. So highly recommend that one, Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. Next up, we have Little Britches by Ralph Moody. This book is actually the first in a series. I don't remember. I think there's maybe like 7 or 8 or something like that. In 1906, Ralph was 8 years old when his family moved from New Hampshire to Colorado. And we were living in Colorado at the time, and I was about that same age. At the end of the book, Ralph is now 11 years old, and the last chapter is called So Long, Partner. And in that chapter, Ralph's dad gets sick and he passes away. And the last 2 paragraphs, it says, that first supper was the most memorable meal of my life. Father had always said grace before meals, always the same 25 words, and the ritual was always the same. Mother would look around the table to see that everything was in readiness. Then she would nod to Father. That night, she nodded to me, and I became a man. And he was 11 years old at the time. And I remember my mom finishing this book and reading that passage to us when I was pretty much that same age. And just weeping and thinking about what if my dad died and what if I had to be the head of our family at 11 years old, and then reading the next books in those series and how he stepped up and how he became the man of the family at that young age. When I just felt like, I can't handle this responsibility. Like I'm just a little boy, It was pivotal in showing me that even at a super young age, I can take so much more responsibility and I can handle so much more if that's what God is asking of me than what I think I can. And so my mom was actually going to get rid of this series, and I was like, don't you dare, and told her that I wanted all of them. So I grabbed them all and am planning on rereading them, and I'm hoping to one day read them to our kids out loud, because I just loved them. They're great stories and just fascinating adventures that Ralph went on throughout the course of his life. So Little Britches, Ralph Moody, great book. Next up, we have Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. I read this book when I was late teens, I want to say. This book was crucial to my understanding of the responsibility that I have within the boundaries of myself as my own human being and as my own man. One of the things they say in here is boundaries define us. They define what is me and what is not me. A boundary shows me where I end and someone else begins, leading me to a sense of ownership. Before reading this book, I had a very screwed up understanding of where I end and where someone else begins. In regards to my family, in regards to people at church, in regards to all this stuff, I didn't have a clear understanding of what I was responsible for and what I wasn't responsible for, and what I was in charge of and what someone else was in charge of. And so reading this book was crucial to me to starting to gain an understanding of this is me and this is the things that I'm responsible for in me. And in that same breath, no one else is responsible for those things. And so no one else can or is going to change those things or improve those things or work on those things. I have to do them for me, and I have to give everyone else the grace to do the same for them. And so highly recommend this book. I would recommend this book to anyone, anywhere, at any time. It is wonderful. Next up, we have a novel that is probably the girliest cover of any novel I will ever show on here, but it is called Redeeming Love. This is a novelization of the book of Hosea from the Bible. And this book, I think I read because my sister said it was good or something like that. I don't even know how. It's not like the one just sitting on the shelf that I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to read that book. But I read this book at a time before I was seriously dating anyone. And then when I got to the time that I was dating my now wife, Kim, I ended up reading it again when I was dating and engaged to her. And then since we've been married, I've read it again. And this book, the example that Michael Hosea sets in this book of loving this woman who was a prostitute and who he rescues, and then who ends up even going back into prostitution, and he rescues her again and he loves her again, and then she cheats on him with his brother, and he just constantly pours out this unending love and devotion to her. And it's coming from a source of every time he wants to stop, he prays and he feels God saying, love her again, forgive her again, forgive her again, forgive her again. And this book radically shaped how I understand loving the woman that God has given to me, and how marriage is a reflection of God's love for us. And so I think I've read this book 4 times, maybe more than that. It is one of my favorite novels of all time. Yeah, it was just absolutely pivotal in shaping me from a boy who didn't understand what loving a woman was to a man who understands how to unconditionally love the wife that God has given me. So yeah, love this book. And the final book for this video is called Resilience by Eric Greitens. Eric also wrote a book called The Heart and the Fist, which is kind of his biography of his time as a humanitarian and then moving into his time as a Navy SEAL. And this book was his follow-up book, and I didn't really realize it at the time, but this book was kind of my introduction to the philosophy of Stoicism. It was so shaping to me in the understanding that the Stoics have and that Eric shares of how they deal with hardship and how we don't fight against them and we don't make the bad thing that's happening worse because of our reaction to it. And so overall, this book was amazing, but there was a part in it, a thing called The Complete Warrior, which is something that Eric came up with. And I actually have this printed on my wall back over here, and I've had it for years. I've printed off copies of it to give to other guys, my brothers and a couple other guys that I know who are good friends of mine. He uses it to distinguish the difference between a child and a warrior. And this has been one of the most fundamental texts for me of a ideal to live up to. And so I've tried to memorize this throughout my life because I just love the way that he says all this. And so he says, when the child is skillful, he boasts. When the warrior has a skill, he teaches. When the child is strong, he attacks the weak. When the warrior is strong, he protects the weak. The child criticizes others to make himself feel better. The warrior is his own most demanding critic. The child brandishes symbols as a substitute for substance. The warrior knows that it is not his position, his rank, his education, or his warfare pin that makes him a man, but his honor. The child serves himself. The warrior serves others. The child relishes gossip. The warrior speaks through action. The child never makes mistakes. The warrior admits his mistakes and corrects them. The child's character is cloudy. The warrior's character is clear. If the child can recognize that he needs teaching, he may one day become a warrior. And when the warrior meets the child, he seeks to teach him. And that is so fundamental to my transformation and my journey from childhood into manhood and from childhood into warriorhood and from being a boy into being a man who can raise his own boys now. So there you have it. 5 books. I have a gajillion more I could probably mention. I might make another one of these videos. If you guys like this, like the video and leave me a comment below. Let me know if you want to see some more books in that same vein, some more books that turned me from a boy into a man. And I'd love to make another follow-up video for this. So anyways, I hope you're having a great day. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment. Let me know. Leave me a like. Make sure you're subscribed. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.